purpose of this lesson is to learn what a string is, how to concatenate strings, how to convert to and from strings, and also what escape sequences are and how to use them. A string is going to be either ASCII or Unicode text. This is going to be things we can type with the keyboard, also things that exist in the Unicode set. The system.string is an actual object that we're going to call. It's a class of objects, and there's an alias that's already configured for us called string that when I sit and type string space and then give it a name, I'm going to create a new variable that is of a string data type, but I'm calling the alias and the system actually will know what to do with that. So when I want to make a new string, I just simply type string and then give it a name. It declares the memory location for the new string variable, but it just simply leaves the value as being null, which means that it has no value to it. Now, when I declare it in this manner, if I say string and then type in some sort of variable name and give it a name and set it equal to something, then I'm declaring the new string variable. I'm setting aside memory location for this variable, and I'm setting the variable to have an initial value of hello world. Now note that I do have to include a string in double quotes. This does declare that it is a string value. It will set the initial value or initialize this memory location so that it contains a value called hello world. In a prior lesson I showed you that I want to declare a new string value, so I simply type string, and then we're going to prefix the actual name of the variable with str, and then whatever we want to call it. It's going to be some descriptive name. So in this case, this is going to be hello statement, or whatever you want to call it. And we're going to set this equal to hello world. Okay, so the order for this is important. The word string declares that it's a data type of string, and if you notice, if I hover it says class system.string represents text as a series of Unicode characters. So this is going to be things that are in the Unicode set. I'm calling it str hello statement. So what I did was I just created a memory location called str hello statement, and then what happened was when I set it equal to something over here, then what it's going to do is it's going to declare the initial value for it. So we are declaring the value and, declaring the variable and initializing its value. And then what we can do is we can take this and we can write it out to the screen. So we can say console.writeLine, and we can do str hello statement. And I also showed you in the last lesson how if I try to just simply end here, it won't actually show anything to me on the screen because it will flash on the screen real fast and disappear and we can't see it. So I'm going to do console.read, and this should be the last line of all of my console apps because I don't want them to go away until I press enter at the end. So I declare a new string value called an str hello statement, set its initial value to hello world in double quotes so that way it's string. Console.writeLine, so we're going to write this to the console. We're going to write str hello statement, and then we're going to pause at the end until I press enter. Alright, so we have our hello world. This is our basic application for any programming language. We always try to write hello world first just so you can see how things get written out to the screen. Now I want to make hello world on two separate lines. Okay, so what I can do is I could do something like this. I could say hello, and then do another console.writeLine. Okay, so I want this in two separate lines, so when I run it, now hello world is on two separate lines. But I want to show you an easier way to do this. We're going to use what's called an escape sequence. So I'm going to put this back the way that it was a minute ago. Oops. Alright, and what I want to do is, when I run this right now, it's one line. I want it to be on two separate lines. So what I can do is up here in hello world, I can use what's called an escape sequence. And an escape sequence is going to be a backslash. That's the one on the key above the enter key on your keyboard. And I'm going to type the letter N for a new line character. And what will happen is all I'm going to do is take this hello world and force it to put a line break here. And now I get hello world on two separate lines. Now you'll notice I do still have the space here because it is literal. It will keep that space. So if I want to get rid of that, I'm just simply going to delete it here, start the program again, and now I have it on two separate lines. there are quite a few escape sequences that you can use. We have the \A, which is an alert, which on some systems, if your computer has a PC speaker, it'll cause the speaker to beep. Now, on a laptop or a computer that doesn't have a speaker, it really doesn't do anything. We can cause the system to backspace. We can actually delete characters if we need to. Form feed, we can actually force the page to move up on the screen. New line characters, we have carriage return, which both of these do about the same thing. The new line, though, is the same as a write line. The carriage return would allow me to write additional things on a line. We can do tabs. We can do vertical tabs, so we can move things down the page. We can put single quotation marks. Now, here's the catch, is if I'm trying to write text out to the screen and I want my text to include a quotation mark, I can't do it because the quotation mark would tell the system, hey, this is the end of my text. But if I use this delimiter, this backslash, and then put the quote, then the system will say, okay, well, they put a backslash and a quote, therefore they want to display a single quotation mark. So this is how we would actually write a quotation mark on the screen if we wanted to. So we have the single quote and double quote, and the same thing with the backslash. If I want to actually display a backslash, I have to put two of them. And then the other thing is if I want a question mark, because the question mark actually has some other features to it. So these are called escape sequences. There are a lot more than these, but these are the ones that would be used regularly, if at all, because there are some that you'll never actually use. I want to show you some different ways to manipulate my text here. So I'm going to make this str hello 1, or let's just call it word 1, just so you can see what it is. And then we're going to have another string that we'll call str word 2. And this is going to be world. Okay, so I'm just simply going to have the words. I'm not going to have any kind of punctuation in them. All right, so I want to actually write this out to the screen. I showed you in a prior lesson how to concatenate strings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something like this. We're going to say str word 1, and then I'm going to have another console.writeLine str word 2. And then we're going to run this. So what I end up with is two lines. One says hello, the other one says world, because I had two console.writeLines. Now, if I were to do just a write statement for this first one and I run it, you'll see that I now have hello world, but it's all run together, and I don't want that. So what I want to do is I want to force it to have a space here. So I could put a space here in hello, and I get hello world. But I really don't want to do that for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate, which means I'm going to add some stuff after this. Okay, so I'm going to display str word 1, and then I'm going to put a comma and a space, because that's what I had before. I had hello, comma, space, world, and then I had an exclamation point after world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate, which means to add some text to it, an exclamation point at the end of world. All right, so start this. Now I get hello world, and I'm getting something that looks more like what I had before, but I'm using two separate variables that just simply have the names, and all I'm doing is adding some text with them. All right, so I could do this a little bit differently. I'm going to modify this, and I want to add to the end of this. So I have str word 1, plus I want to add a comma and a space, and then plus, and then str word 2, and then a space, plus, and then our exclamation point. Okay, run this, I get the same thing. Okay, so what I'm doing is just simply showing you different ways that you can get the same output, but whenever we concatenate things, the system, by using the plus sign here, it has to overload or provide additional functionality to our plus sign, which means it uses additional resources. So we want to try not to do this if we can, and what we're going to do instead is we're going to use what's called character substitution. String substitution. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten this whole thing to be the 0 and 1 in curly brackets. We did this in a prior lesson. All right, so now what I can do is curly bracket 0 is str word 1, and then the second one is str word 2. And so now what I end up with something that looks a little bit neater and a little bit easier to follow. So whatever 0 is, that's going to be the first item in our list is str word 1. Will get substituted here. And then str_word2 is the second item in our list, so that will get substituted here. Now remember, in C# we always start counting at 0. So 0 is our first element, 1 is our second element. All right, so if I start this, once again, I get the exact same output, but just different ways to type the text and mean the exact same thing. So I can concatenate strings, I can do separate write line comments, or write line statements, I can do substitution, and I get the exact same output. I also showed in there how to do the escape sequence for a new line character. All right, now in a console-based application, we do console.write, but the question is, how would we do this if it were a GUI-based application? So to do a GUI-based application, I'm going to have to make a new project, and it will actually take a little bit more work. So this is why I said sometimes the console-based application, we just want to throw something together real quick, is faster. In our GUI-based applications, we have to actually build the whole project, including all the elements, before we can do anything. So let's go ahead and start building one. All right, so I'm going to close this solution, and then I want to make a new project. In this case, I'm going to make a Windows Forms application, and this is going to be our Hello World. Hello World. Oops. Let's call it Hello World GUI. Okay, so I have a new GUI app. Now, whenever I make a GUI-based application, I now have additional things on the screen that I actually have to start playing with. All right, so I have this thing called a form, and the form is what would actually show up on the screen. I can run this program right now, and this is what would actually show up if my program were to run. Now, you notice it says Form 1 at the top. This is our title bar. This is considered to be bad design because I haven't renamed it yet. So there are some things that we need to do whenever we make a new project, which is, first thing is rename this thing. So I'm going to come over here, and on the bottom right I have this properties window. Now the properties window has all of the properties for this form. By default, it will come over here to this categorized view, which means that it tries to put all of the properties into categories. So these are accessibility, these are appearance, and so forth. I prefer the alphabetical list, and what it'll do is all of the properties will be in alphabetical order. So what I want to manipulate is text here, and this text is Form 1, so I'm going to call this Hello World. And when I press enter, you'll notice that the title bar up here changes to Hello World. And when I run it, that's what I now get as my title bar. So it makes it a little bit nicer looking. It doesn't give it the unprofessional feel of having the wrong name. All right, so what I want to do is I want to display a label here that has the output. So instead of having our console.write line, I want to manipulate a label. Now our label here, label 1, I just dragged it out. Take our label, drag it over, and then now I can manipulate it. Now you'll notice that it is actually called label 1, and we're going to learn how to rename these. I just want to show you the basics for right now. But what I want to do is I want to make it where I have a button on the screen, and when you click this button, it will change this label to say Hello World. Now by default, this label has text of its name, and I'm going to delete that. Now when I delete this, you'll notice that my label just went blank here, and if I click off of it, I lost the label. Oh, it's gone. Okay, but it still shows up over here under the properties window. I have a drop-down box of all of the elements that I have on my screen, including label 1. So I can always get it back just by simply clicking over here, and I can select it and get the item that I need. All right, so our button here, I want to change the text for our button. Maybe we'll do something like go. Usually we want to do something a little bit more descriptive, but for this case, when I click the go button, I wanted to change that text up there. All right, so what we're going to do is I want to make it, if you click on the button, that it does something. And every object has a default action. Like a button, we typically want to click a button. So what we're going to do is make it where if I click the button, then it will display the text. So I'm going to double click on my button. And when I double click on it, what it did was it just created a, let's call it a click event. And this click event just simply says that if you click on it, this is the little section of code that's going to run. Now I have two new tabs up here. I have the code tab is the .cs, and then I have the designer tab, which is the one that actually shows the design of the form. And over here, if I'm selecting the button here, I have a little lightning bolt over this called events. And you'll notice that under the event for click, I have this thing called button1_click. And what this means is that if you click on this button, if the event of a click occurs, then it's going to run the section of code called button1_click. Here's button1_click. So if you click on the button, then this little section of code will run. Alright, so what I want to do this time is the same thing as before. I want to take hello world and actually display it out to the screen. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by hard coding that I want it to say hello world, and then I'll show you how to use some variables. Alright, so we have this object called label1. So if I start typing label1, label1 has a property of text, and I want to manipulate its text property. I can't manipulate the label, but I can manipulate the text property for the label. Alright, so I'm going to say label1 dot, and then when I do the dot, I have all of these different properties and events that I could actually manipulate for it. And one of them is called text. Alright, so I'm going to take label1.text and I want to set it equal to something. And in this case, I'm going to say hello world. Okay, so a little bit different than our console.writeLine. Console.writeLine, we're going to send information to the writeLine method. It has to be inside of parentheses. In this one, we're going to take label1.text and set it equal to hello.world or hello world. So now if I run this, the label is not here. I can't see it. I can't even select the label. But if I click the go button, now we get hello world that pops up. So what I did is by clicking the button, I told it run this little section of code, and it takes the label1.text property and sets it equal to hello world. Exit out, and now I want to show you how to use different variables. Okay, so I'm going to do like we did before, and I'm going to make a new string, and I'm going to call it hello statement. And we're going to set this equal to hello world. So I'm going to cut this from here and paste it up here. Alright, and what we're going to do is we're going to set label1.text equal to this value, str hello statement. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm setting a variable that is hello world is inside of str hello statement. And when you click the button, then we're going to set the label1 text property to str hello statement. So we get the exact same output, but now we're using a variable to do this. Alright, so this is the basic. I want to just simply replace it with a variable. But what if I want to replace it with multiple variables? And then it gets a little bit different because our concatenation and our string substitution actually function a little bit differently. So I'm going to do this like I did with the console app. I'm going to make hello our first word. So we're going to call this str word1, and then I make another string for str word2 and call this world. Okay, so how would I do this in our console app? Okay, our console app, I would do something like this. I'd say console.writeLine, and then we would say 0. The right characters here. And then we would do something like str word1, str word2, like this. So on a console application, this is how we would do it. But we don't have a console for this app. We have our label that we want to manipulate. Alright, so if I were to do something like this, if I were to take this from here and just simply paste it down here. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this line of code. So I'm just going to comment it out so we can see that it's still there, but it's not going to do anything. You'll see we actually are getting an error right now. And the reason for it is we can't set this text value equal to some other things. We can only set it equal to one thing. Alright, so what I need to do is I need to use a method called string.format. And what I can do is I can send all of this to string.format. So I'm going to take our 0, 1, and str word 1 goes into 0, str word 2 goes into here. We send this whole thing over to string.format. It turns the whole thing into a string, and then it will allow us to put it into our text value. And so now we have our hello world. Okay, so you'll notice that our console.writeLine and our string.format, those are equivalent commands for the console versus the GUI. If I want to format something as string for a console, I do a console.writeLine. If I want to format my string as a GUI app, then I do a string.format. Right now, also, just like in our console app, if I want to, I can still use my escape sequences. So what I'm going to do is replace the space with the \n. Remember, that was our new line character. And when I start this, when I click the go button, now you'll see hello and world are on two separate lines. So I'm manipulating the label1.text property. I'm taking my two words, sending them over to string.format, and allowing it to format it the way that I have typed here. And then by doing that, we actually can manipulate this label just like we do the console applications. All right, I need to show you something else that can occur with strings and numbers. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Actually, I just need to delete these first three here. And what I want to do is I want to have two numbers and a text string. So I'm going to make a text string here. And I'm going to call it strnum1. Now I know this is a string, but I'm going to put a number into it. And I'm going to set this equal to 3. And then I'm going to make an integer called int num2. And we're going to set that equal to 5. Now notice if this is a text string, I have to put it in double quotes. So that's our text string. And this is an integer, which I'm going to take 5. And I want to make another integer value called int total. And it's going to be, what I'm going to do with int total is I want to add the number 3 plus the number 5. So I'm going to set this equal to, actually right now I'm not going to set it equal to anything. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say int total is equal to strnum1 plus int num2. Okay, now what we're going to do here is we're taking strnum1 and int num2, and I want to actually add those two numbers together. The problem is that this one is a text string. It's not a number. Okay, so what I have to do is I have to somehow convert this to a number. Now I showed you before that if I have a number and a decimal and a float or whatever, I can explicitly cast them. I could try to explicitly cast this str number as an integer, but you can't do this. It doesn't work. It only works between numbers. Okay, so if I have a text string, then what I have to do is I will have to actually convert this thing to a number somehow. So I'm going to declare pardon me, a new integer type. I'm going to call it int num1 and not actually give it a value. And what I want to do is I want to take this 3 that's up here and somehow put it into this integer value called num1. And the way that I do that is I'm going to take int num1 and I'm going to set that equal to whatever this strnum1 is. But I have to convert it to an integer before I can do anything. There's actually a method that I can use called convert.toInt32. And what this will do is it'll take whatever I send to it and try to convert it to an integer. Okay, well, what am I converting? I'm converting strnum1. Okay, so what happens is it says, okay, take strnum1, and if it looks like a number, try to convert it to an integer. If this works, we're going to stick it into int num1, and then now what I can do is I can add those together. Okay, so I'm going to actually put here what the output is, and I'm going to string.format it so we can see it. So we're going to do something like the total or the sum of, and then this is going to be our first element, 0, and our second element is 1, is, and then our third element. Okay, so what are we putting in here? Okay, so 0 is going to be strnum1. One is going to be int num2, and then our second item here is going to be int total. So what we're doing is we're using our character substitution, our string substitution. Whatever strnum1 is, we'll get to substitute it here. Now notice this is an integer, but it will automatically convert it to an integer, or to a number, to a string to stick it here. And this one is also an integer, and it'll automatically convert it to a string to stick it here. So what we should end up with is, even though I'm looking at a string that is the number 3, we're going to convert it to an integer to be able to perform this calculation, but we can still go back and reference the original number. Alright, so if I run this, I click the go button, the sum of 3 and 5 is 8. And that's exactly what I wanted, but the thing is that 3 isn't a number, 3 is a text string. But for me to be able to use it as part of my calculation, I have to convert it to a text string. Now this is what's called strongly typed data type language. And what that means is that I cannot try to add a number and a text string together. It will not let me do it. I have to make a brand new variable to hold that that value so that I can perform a calculation on it. So what I can do is I can take this number 3, convert it to an integer. And then conversely, I could convert things back to a string if I wanted to. So if I wanted to do something like int total, I could make a new string value, and we'll call it string str total. And what we could do is we could say something like str total is equal to convert.toString, and then we're going to send int total to it. So you can convert from an integer to a string, and you can convert from a string to an integer, but we have to specifically convert it here. We actually have to use the convert method. Now later we'll learn some other methods that will allow us to do the same thing, but for right now just get in the habit of making sure you convert from one data type to another. If it's from one number type to another number type, we're going to try to explicitly cast them. That's the parentheses in front, and put the data type. If it is from a text string to a number, or from a number to a text string, then we actually have to do this specific casting here, or converting. In this lesson, you learned what a string is. You learned how to concatenate strings. You learned how to convert to and from strings. You also learned about escape sequences, and then character and string substitution.